Hi everyone, and welcome to the first Tea with Helen show, where my guest is a long-standing colleague of mine, Peter Bruce, who has been a journalist for much, much longer than I was. We started in roughly the same time, and he had an illustrious career abroad, came back, edited a number of publications, including Business Day and the Financial Mail, and was also editor-in-chief of the Business Day. He has a very widely read series of columns that he writes every week, and I thought he would be really interesting because he was one of the big proponents of supporting Cyril Ramaphosa's New Dawn. And we're going to be discussing that and a range of other things over tea, and I won't badger him about the fact that he's a Sharks supporter. Well, hi Peter, welcome to the first ever Tea with Helen podcast. I'm so glad to be hosting you, and I think everybody knows that you are a prominent editor, columnist, and if I dare say, polemicist. But I'd much rather you introduced yourself. I think that would be better for the viewers.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. You know, I've been a journalist in this country now since I came back to this country in 1996. So I've written a lot, and I've written a lot about you. Some of it I know has angered you and hurt you, for which I apologize completely. And it's an honor to be here. It's your guest number one, even if it's a bit scary. But yeah, you know, I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist since 1975. I joined the Natal Mercury as a sub-editor. I remember you were far more glorious position than I was on the Rand Daily Mail in around about 78. I left the country in 78 and went and worked for the Financial Times, and I had a great time at the FT, taught me a lot. They posted me overseas, and I've had a lot of experience. I'm not an intellectual by any means. I'm a sub-editor by inclination. And I came back here and I was extremely lucky. I was offered a job as the second editor of Business Report, and did a reasonable enough job there, and as a result was offered the editorship of the Financial Mail when, you'll remember, Nigel Bruce and David Gleeson walked out one day. I had a couple of years on the FM and then edited Business Day in the same group, which was then Times Media and now TISO Blackstar, for 14 years. And having been sub-editor, reporter, news editor, I'm now a columnist. For my sins, not an analyst, please. I don't know what I'm talking about most of the time, but I do have strong opinions at the moment of writing.
Yes.
And I try to express them as entertainingly as I can.
Well, you certainly have a huge followership and readership, and there's no need ever to apologize for what one writes at a particular time, although I think it's very important to reflect on what one has written.
Of course, yeah.
And I also think that it's very important for us to be able to read the stuff and analyze the stuff, and I also hold my views very strongly, but provisionally until a better argument comes along. But I think that journalists and editors have a longer shelf life than politicians, because you can come back as a columnist in your own newspaper, but I think politicians have to disappear nicely and quietly.
Well, you're not disappearing, are you? I mean, this is the opposite of disappearing.
Well, it's not my thing.
You're going to have a big following on the show, I've no doubt. You know, I've been very lucky as having edited for as long as I did. The company's kept me on and kept me, you know, I keep a paycheck. It isn't what it used to be. But I enjoy being able to say what I think about things, and it's not something I take for granted. And I have some serious real estate in both Business Day and the Sunday Times, and I don't take that for granted.
Great. Well, that's been absolutely wonderful. And as you know, when politics and politicians are done, they are shoved out the way, but they always can make their own space. So that's really very, very useful. And you're lucky also to have a paycheck. Have you ever tried to get your pension out of government? That's quite another story, but I'll leave that there for a moment.
Yes.
Quite another story.
Right. Well,
but I chose you as my first guest because I suppose all South African eyes, Peter, are on Cyril Ramaphosa. And you, above all, champion through your writing Cyril Ramaphosa and the need to give his new dawn a chance. And on Monday, the day that this podcast is going to go live, he will have been in office for his second term on his own mandate for 100 days. So you know what journalists do with 100 days?
There's always a 100-day review.
Yeah, 100-day review. And so let this be Cyril's first 100-day review. How would you analyze his performance so far?
It's been terrible. He's under... I mean, if you... I will go back just now to why I did what I did, because I'd like to try and explain it. But and it's complicated and twisted and it's complex. But anyway, I mean, look, the record so far is not good, and it's quite scary. Watching the kind of attacks that he's under for a start, the inability or lack of willingness to act where action is clearly needed, particularly in the economy. He's behaving now like he behaved in the run-up to the election, and in fact to the ANC conference, which was that he kept his head down. He doesn't say a lot. He doesn't want to, and often when he does, he doesn't do it very well. He is not very good at answering unexpected questions, So you'll have him after a news conference in New York, I think it was last year. Somebody from Bloomberg's put a microphone in his face, and there was obviously a camera facing him, and said, what can you tell us about farm murders in South Africa? And he said there are no farm murders, which is just an idiotic thing to do. But he doesn't respond well, which in, Musi Maimani's famous question about Bosasa, which was, I think, an unscripted question, also took him by surprise, and he fumbled it. So probably, good reason that he doesn't talk as much as we would like him to.
But even if he was good on his feet, even if he could answer questions very quickly on his feet, which is a prerequisite for a politician in this day and age, has he had the guts to do what has to be done? And to go back even further, was that even possible, given the balance of forces in the NEC, given the list composition of the ANC, given how fine that balance is? Was it a bridge too far to even imagine that he could pull it off?
No, I don't think so, and I don't think the story's over yet. I mean, quite a few people have written them off, and I don't know that that's smart. I played a game with myself today. I wrote a column for Business Day tomorrow, and I recorded the value of the rand against the pound when I started, and what it was a couple of hours later when I'd finished writing. And it had moved significantly. It's a very volatile. This time it was a strengthening.
In a positive direction. It
was a strengthening.
Yes, I saw that
from 1862 to 1842 or something like that. And so we were in a strange kind of environment. I've forgotten your question.
My question is, did he ever have a chance in the first place?
Yes, I think he does, and I think he does have a chance. But he's going to do it. He's going to do it his way, if time permitting. I mean, there's a very real chance that Cyril serves 2 terms, in the absence of obvious rivals, because there's no doubt in my mind that the Zuma threat itself is diminishing. I don't know whether you saw it, but there was a very nice piece, the op-ed lead on Sunday Times on Sunday, from a reporter we don't hear a lot of, called Sibonga Konke Shoba.
Yes.
Nice young man, very quiet, actually goes to branch meetings, he knows the ANC very well. And while he didn't say Ramaphosa was winning, he emphatically said Msholozi, as he called him, Jacob Zuma, was losing this battle. The fight back was losing steam. And you could see it in branches, you could see the way the KZN PEC had come out for Ramaphosa. So he's first, and I'm sure as a political party leader you'll appreciate that. I mean, we can laugh at the unity talk, but you've got to strive for that if you're running a party. You can't go around admitting that your party is divided and all that kind of stuff. So he's going to spend more time doing that probably than he should. But without the party behind him, he really is finished. And the party is still behind him, in my view. And I think that he does have time to institute some kinds of reforms. They may be institutional. He'll get Ruel Khoza to run the PRC, and Ruel Khoza is a serious guy. The appointments that he's made to the NPA are good appointments. He can't do their job for them. So those things, he gets to choose, between now and the end of his term, if he sees it through, I think he gets to reappoint the majority of the Constitutional Court as well.
Well, you see, all those are very important things in our Constitution and huge powers that the President does have.
Yeah.
But weren't those really the lowest of low-hanging fruits for him?
Well, I'm sure.
Sean Abrams was put out of the job by the courts, so he could put Shamila Batoy in as the National Director of Public Prosecutions. Edward Kieswetter as the head of SARS after Tom Moyani. Those were very important, but much easier things to do. So if, as you say, he has to keep the party behind him, the cost of that is not doing anything bold or anything that has to be done to save the economy, for example. Well,
you see, I mean, a lot of what's happening to the economy is a lack of confidence. A lot of the lack of confidence is because they don't appear to be doing anything. But just imagine if some of those institutional changes begin to bear some fruit on their own. People get arrested, or people have their SARS can do more damage to you than any police unit or the NPA. And it's possible that those things might happen. I mean, it's inconceivable that there cannot be any arrests out of state capture.
It is inconceivable, but what is a fair amount of time to give Shamila Batoy?
I don't know. I don't know what it's like to be one. I mean, if had they put Glynis Breitenbach back in the job, she'd be in court already. I've no doubt.
She's a Rottweiler.
Yeah,
no
she is a Rottweiler.
Yeah.
But they didn't, and probably for the right reasons, because the politics were
it's impossible
right.
to have been a DA MP and then to become the National Director of Public Prosecutions. And I really hope that Shamila Batoy and Hermione Cronje, her deputy, have really now got what it takes to do the job.
Well,
but the big question that I have is, Cyril is very wounded.
Yeah, he is.
If his number one priority is to keep the party together, can he do things like unbundling Eskom, which is absolutely critical as a first step? Why can't he, as you wrote the other day, put in really good CEOs into the state-owned enterprises to try and turn them around? The one guy who came from the private sector, Mark Barnes, has resigned. He said he can't do anything. He can't get anything done there. I mean, these are basic things. They should be easy to do. In fact, Ramaphosa got up and promised that he was going to unbundle Eskom. He's pulled right back from that. Is he able, if he's trying to hold the party together and behind him, is he able to do anything, or will it just be more of the same?
No, he can't do nothing. I mean, he has two big moments coming up in the next couple of weeks. One, there's a mini budget, the medium-term budget policy statement, I think it's correctly called. And two, in November, Moody's re-rates us. And he has to get over those two hurdles. I mean, the budget, depending on what's in it, will affect the ratings one way or other. And by the time Tito Mboweni stands up and delivers that budget, he has to have a solution for Eskom in front of him. They've made, I think, a disastrous appointment in the head of the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, being put in to run the so-called Chief Restructuring Office in Eskom, because all his job is to do. There are about 4 or 5 proposals on the table for Eskom, and they all involve what to do with Eskom's debt. Eskom has plainly said we need 250 billion rand off the balance sheet, and there are different ways to do that. Where do you plant it? Can you do that in a way that's ratings positive? For instance, could you make rather like they did with African Bank? Do you remember they split it into a good bank and bad bank?
And they ring-fence the debt and they put it over here.
They ring-fence the debt, but they actually that debt is tradable.
Yes, I understand. But why can't he do that?
Well, they may. So, but what he wants to do, this is very typical of the ANC. Nobody wants to make a decision, but it will have to be made by the time Tito Mboweni stands up to deliver that budget. That decision will have to be made. This is what we're going to do with the debt. This is who's going to own it, and this is what's going to happen to Eskom. I think the DA wants it split into 2. He wants to split it into 3. It's a call one way or the other. I don't think that matters particularly, but I think they will split up Eskom. You cannot continue holding coal-fired power stations in the same business as you run transmission or distribution.
Absolutely. And in fact, I spent a long time as Premier on an energy game changer, precisely to look at the growth of the green economy. And Moody's, interestingly enough, said we had the fastest growing green economy in the world as a result of our focus, on that. And of course, now we can provide green energy cheaper than they can provide coal-fired energy. So probably Eskom is non-viable at all in the long term.
This is a matter of interest. I mean, how many megawatts do you generate of green energy in the Western Cape?
We generate a lot, but we have the capacity to generate much, much more if the government allowed.
In numbers, like 100?
Well, all I know is that previously there were 2 points of generation in the Western Cape. One was the dam.
The one where you take it up and you run it down
again. That's correct. And there was Stellenbosch Dam, and then the other one was Coburg. So the 2 points of generation, they're now 3,000. And there are wind farms, and there are solar farms, and there are a whole range, and that was specifically a focus on our game changer, energy game changer, fastest growing green economy in the world, and now cheaper than coal-fired energy. So it is absolutely magnificent story. But
you include nuclear in that mix. If you
no, we don't. No.
Okay.
No, sun energy is now cheaper than coal-fired energy. And that is extraordinary because we've got this endless resource. And if Eskom would just let the generators feed it directly into the grid and us purchase directly from the independent power producers, voila. But then how does Eskom pay back their debt? That is the big problem. So the economy is being hamstrung because the argument goes, if Eskom can't repay its debt, the economy goes down. But for Eskom to repay its debt, electricity becomes unaffordable and the economy goes down. So it's a classic catch-22 situation.
But there is legislation in place now, and this is another thing that's happened, I think, since Ramaphosa took office, was that you can, in theory now, generate your own electricity.
Yes, you can.
And nobody's going to get in your way if you want to, and if you want to put, panels all over your roof, you can do that. And I think I've seen recently talk about people being able to sell back into the grid.
There is talk of that. And some people actually do get credits in the city of Cape Town against the electricity they generate. That's a fantastic model. But we don't want people to go off the grid. Because the minute they go off the grid, then we have lost the capacity of generating the energy economy that we want. People become insular.
You lose the ability to charge them?
No. We would lose the ability to trade electricity and create an interconnected economy out of electricity, which is a really important thing that you want to do. So unless we can fix Eskom, so many other opportunities fall by the wayside, and obviously South Africa can be bankrupted. So these are critical things that people are looking for.
And I'm sure that they're aware of that. I mean, Pravin Gordhan has been trying to save Eskom, or trying to stave off a ratings downgrade since 2015, when Zuma acted against Nhlanhla Nene. And I can't believe, and we're talking about a fairly hard line left winger in Pravin Gordhan. I mean, let's not make any mistakes about that.
Let's make no mistakes about that. No, he's an honest one, but he's definitely. But then coming back to that, he was in charge of the CR17 campaign.
Well, one of them were,
he and a range of other people. Now we see by the revelations that we've just had that there have been hundreds of millions sloshing around in front accounts, unaudited, unaccounted for. How does one explain honest people doing that? Well, or is it a case of just a huge patronage network masquerading as something else?
Well, I'm sure the patronage is there. It's a feature of the ANC, and it has been for a long time. And it was probably a feature of all nationalisms, really, including Afrikaner nationalism, which we grew up under, you and I. I don't know what to make of this, of the funds. You talk about Pravin Gordhan. Pravin raised money, but he didn't give it to anybody. So his job was to go out and get, 2 million from so-and-so, or whatever it was. So there's a whole thing going on there, and it really is a hell of a mess between raising the money and then distributing it to whoever was going to do what with, whether you're renting a stadium for the day and buses bring people in and give them T-shirts and caps or whatever it might be, or whether you actually literally are buying votes. I don't know. It needs to be explained. We need to know who gave Cyril 120 million, let alone the 10 or 5 even that we come up with. There was one donor who gave a huge amount of
120,
that.
that's correct.
Yeah.
And the amounts in that fund have varied from 200
Well,
million
this is the thing.
to 400 million to $1 billion was one of the statistics.
And so we don't know. So the 200 is what the CR17 campaign says they raised. The 400 is what the public protector says.
Correct.
And the 1 billion is what the independent newspaper group is reporting.
Okay. Well, the bottom line is this, that however much it was, I think it is absolutely clear from the revelations and from the bank statements that it was a large bribery network. Let me not even say a patronage network, because patronage is giving jobs to pals, giving tenders to pals, the kind of thing you spoke about. But this looks as if it was a whole bribery network. And the ANC looks as if it is just an interlocking set of different bribery networks. Now, Joel Netshitenzi wrote a very fascinating piece just recently, I don't know whether you read it, in which he said, well, you know, that's the way the ANC has functioned since 2007. We have bribed people, or the ANC has bribed people at conferences to vote in certain ways since 2007. You can't win unless you play the game, so tactically you have to play the game if you want the better guy to win. Now, how does that argument wash with you?
Well, I mean, I don't know whether it was all bribes. I mean, some of it must have been spent on Fanta and
Sure.
T-shirts. And
But even if some was a bribe.
well, you see, what we need to find out what, you know, if there was criminal activity in there, it needs to be found out and it needs to be prosecuted. The CR17 campaign needs to be more open. The president needs to be more open. He can assume that somebody's got everything. So he needs to assume the absolute worst and then deal with it like a grown-up, basically. I worry that he's not well advised. Certainly, he has, you know, the ability to get ahead of the story isn't there in his office or the people around him.
Do you know who's advising him?
Well, I know he has a spokesman. I don't know who's advising him. You know, I mean, Chris Vick wrote a really nice piece yesterday, I think it was. I saw it on Twitter, to say you've got to get ahead of the story. You can't over communicate on something like this is happening to you.
Now let's just look at two cabinet, well, a cabinet minister, two actually, but one, the Minister of Small Business Development. Her name is Khumbudzo Ntshavheni.
Yeah.
She is recorded as having received 5 million rand to coordinate the CR17 campaign in Limpopo. Now that's a lot of money, and you've got to do a lot of work to get money like that.
Yeah.
I wonder if she's declared it in Parliament or declared it to the South African Revenue Services.
I don't know. Well, you know, the South African Revenue Service already knows it, because I'm sure they read the newspapers. They'll have a look.
Well, I hope they have a look, because you know what I don't know, of course. We heard that Jacob Zuma had not filled in a tax return since he became president in 2000.
That's not true.
Have you seen his tax return?
No, but I was assured by a former commissioner after Jacques Pauw's book came out that he had, in fact, he was up until 2012, and you can work out who the commissioner is.
Yes.
Jacob Zuma was paid up.
Was he paid up? And then 2012 he was gone, or when Moyani came.
Yeah.
No wonder Moyani was put into that position. Yeah. And that is the problem with... But now you see, the thing is, Jacob Zuma leading the tax revolt. I wonder if he's put in any tax returns since then. Jacob Zuma leading the tax revolt, many of his cronies, the Guptas, were probably the commanders-in-chief of the tax revolt. So here we have that, and I wonder if Edward Kieswetter and SARS are going to go after somebody like Minister Ntshavheni or Bernie Swartz. Now, I've never heard of Bernie Swartz before.
No, neither have I.
Apparently, she is an ANC MP whose support for the CR17 campaign was thought to be worth 16 million rand.
Look, you know,
What do you do
all
for
we can
16
say,
million rand?
well, I don't know, you know, and that's, so you've got to get, you know, we've got to get a hold of her or put her in court or put her, you know, she's got to answer some questions. She might have been given 14 million rand to do something with, you know. Was she given a region to cover, to get onto the CR17 ticket or what? I don't know. I mean,
apparently these were paid into bank accounts.
Yeah, I know. So what we also have is an incompetent fundraising, because it was clearly hadn't learnt any lessons from the Americans. I mean, the Americans have this down to a fine art now. They have these political action committees that can raise any amount. There's no limit to amount how much a PAC or a super PAC can raise in the States, and they do, and they raise, just for the party primaries, candidates will spend what Cyril spends. So there are lessons in there and there's no need to, we can understand how they arrived there and just copy them. The super PAC isn't secret, you've got to be open about it. So there are lessons to be learned here, and some of them are going to be hard because there's no way that the president cannot answer questions about this. And if Ed Kieswetter and Shamila Batoy are worth half of their jobs, they would be looking at all of this very critically.
Well, I really hope they are, because there is a great risk that something like the Zondo Commission becomes part of a big cover-up. So, for example, a commission of inquiry is not a court of law. They don't charge you with an offence, they don't hear evidence, they don't have cross-examination in the traditional sense. They can't reach a conclusion, they can't sentence you, and they can't impose a punishment. So it could just be a kind of mass outpouring of national psychology and information, but nothing actually happens afterwards.
Well, we hope so, but I mean, presumably, and I don't know, presumably there are people from the NPA and the Hawks sitting in there, right? There are some reports brought out during the course of state capture that actually end with, just to make it easy for the police, there's particularly one on Prasa.
Yes.
Which was investigated by two firms of lawyers, one of whose report ends with the actual acts under which X or Y, Brian Molefe, for instance, you can charge him criminally with this offence under this act. And, 3 years later after the report, there's still no action. So
now, why is there no action?
Well, I don't know.
When the report says he broke this law, you can charge him under that, here is the evidence, and nothing.
Well, all I can assume is that somebody in the NPA has read this blooming report, because, if I've read it, everybody's got it.
Don't you think that's an important story for journalists to
pursue?
I mean, give Shamila Batoy a call and say, are you aware of this report and what's happening? Where are you on it?
Yeah. Look, you're going to run into this, everybody wants to be fair to her, and she's, she keeps saying, well, I've inherited this terrible institution and there's nobody here, and, everybody's sort of been bought, and I don't know who my colleagues are. Sooner or later that doesn't work any longer, she's actually got to be able to, and they've got, they've got a top lawyer, and you'll know him very well, man, working with the special investigative, in the special investigations unit, Jeff Budlander. So Jeff Budlander is in the NPA now, looking at winnable cases.
Well, that's
good. Because you don't have to get everybody for everything. You just need to get them on one thing, put them in jail, and
but you've got to go for the big fish. I mean, Brian Molefe has to pay back 11 million rand now. And if a firm of lawyers has said, well, he can be charged with A, B, C, and D, hopefully there will be some accountability in the system.
I mean, I'm often probably quite correctly being accused of being a romantic about these things, but if I was Shamila Batoy, I would come out one day, whenever I'm ready, and say, we're going to charge the following 25 people with X or Y, and arrest them all, perp walk them all into cars, and just make a big national show of it, because the resulting sort of return of confidence in the public would be absolutely huge. And
it would be huge. But you see, we have got many different institutions of accountability because we've got a strong constitution. If you look at it in that way, its biggest weakness is that the president gets to appoint many of the people who head the institutions of accountability. But ironically, the one institution that is pursuing everybody is the institution that is the most flawed, which is the current public protector, Busisiwe Mkhwebane. And how would you answer the statement that even though she has been seen to be not very au fait with the law or not very neutral, could she have by accident have bumbled on this whole hornet's nest and exposed something that was critical to expose?
I don't know. I mean, one of the things about being a columnist is that you're allowed to be a conspiracy theorist as well. What's clear is that Cyril Ramaphosa's comms have been compromised for a very long time. Getting hold of the bank accounts was obviously easy because she has the power to. Yes,
she could subpoena them under FICA.
The fact that she's the only person that has subpoenaed them. The fact that they're in the public means they've been leaked, and the only person capable of leaking them, or the only institution capable of leaking them, would have been her office. I don't know that the way that she's behaving does anything to strengthen her office or the institution of the public protector. I mean, it'll be a long time before another public protector is kind of trusted by the public. I mean, I think, we need to be careful because you and I live on Twitter, and it's a bubble.
Speak for yourself, Peter.
No, you're there so fast, and you've got 1.3 million followers. I'm stuck with 100,000, half of which I think are machines somewhere.
No, I get rid of all my machines. I complain to Twitter about every machine.
I don't get anyway. I just basically just Twitter hint if you don't like the abuse. It's just in the settings you cannot follow anybody who doesn't follow you don't see anything from people you don't follow.
No, I don't like that. I think Twitter is a great open.
Really?
A great open sewer.
No, I hate being called names. I don't
mind being called names. I get called names every day. I mind when it's you, of course, as you know.
No, I know. I apologize. No. But I want to get back to that because I had a when Musi Maman, and this is why I did what I did with Cyril last year. It was a bit of a long story, so just give me a minute. The only thing that I've always been is a stakeholder capitalist. So I believe in a form of capitalism in which more people can be drawn into. The Germans have a variation.
Yes, I know the German model very well.
And I wanted to. I began to see quite a little bit of Musi and talk to him about economic politics, because I always felt that you and Tony Leon had ignored it, and that it cost us because we needed a liberal economic solution to the country. There is a policy there, but you didn't speak it as often as I thought you should. Anyway, so I began to talk to him, and we had some quite nice engagements, and I began to think that I was making some sort of progress, and silly me, and you sort of dropped into that with your colonialism and Singapore tweets.
Legacy of colonialism, the two
legacy
are very different.
Legacy of,
yes.
And I, like a lot of people, responded negatively, and some of the things I said I probably shouldn't have, but I thought that you were doing him damage. So it took me quite a long time to get to the point where I became a bit disillusioned with him. But when was that, 2017 or 16? The legacy of colonialism.
That was 2017.
Okay.
That was 2017.
Okay. So, and there's a thing you left out, by the way, on your legacy of colonialism, was the benefits of expropriation. Because all the land in Singapore, what Lee Kuan Yew did was expropriate. This was a swamp, basically, that the British left.
But now
and he expropriated. He capped it with compensation, but it was capped.
With compensation and with everybody's agreement.
Well, no. You wanted the land, they took it. They paid you that price. And there was a law that started in 1965, and when they lifted it in 2010. So it was there for a long time.
Well, let me just say one thing. I was very careful to say in my analysis of that Singapore is not a democracy, and we want to be a democracy. But one of the reasons that they have succeeded is because they have been able to separate the wheat from the chaff on the legacy of colonialism and built on what was good and repurposed it. That was all I was saying. And a legacy of something is entirely different from the event itself. Okay. So we've put that behind us.
We'll come back to it if we have to. But so I watched with increasing dismay the sort of absence of economic policy speaking in coming out of the DA, and two things happened, and I can't. The one was the hiring, and then the complete ignoring of Gwen and Gwenya, which I really.
That was shocking.
I thought it was awful.
Shocking.
And the other thing that really shook me were the arrangements made with the economic freedom fighters in Johannesburg and Pretoria and
well,
PE.
we've had a long discussion on that before.
So I just felt that you couldn't say to me on one hand, let's vote for all the good things in life, and basically live off or stand on the shoulders of the EFF just to keep power in Joburg or wherever. And I spoke of a desperation for it. And so when it came to, and I didn't choose to particularly a moment to start supporting Cyril. It literally started as a barroom conversation where everybody was complaining about the DA and the EFF, and somebody said, "Oh, bugger it, I'm going to vote for Cyril." So I asked around, and a lot of people were, and they weren't talking about the ANC. They said they liked Ramaphosa. So I wrote a piece about them doing this. I've always liked Cyril. I know him. I haven't seen him for 10 years, but he was on the board of Business Day and the Financial Mo when I first became an editor, so I knew him from there. And I thought, that it was a reasonable proposition to not to advise people, but to say, listen, this is what I'm going to do. That I'm going to vote for somebody who strikes me as being a reasonable man in the office of the presidency, because of the people who could possibly have become president. It didn't seem a bad choice at the time. I obviously underestimated the strength of the fight back. I think it's dissipating. I think, they're basically, once you've got to the bank accounts, and let the law take its course here,
Well, I hope the law does take its course.
Well,
That's
I absolutely cannot see Ed Kieswetter saying to his people, don't do that. I cannot see Shamila Batohi saying, I'm not going to do that, because it'll upset Ramaphosa.
Good, great. Well, let's see what happens. Now, let me just say one other thing. You'll remember that I wrote a column in response to your column saying if you just look and unpack the ANC's list and unpack the NEC, for example, you will see that Cyril Ramaphosa won't be able to move, because he will be hemmed about by people who will oppose any form of reform and who indeed actually want David Mabuza to be president.
Yeah.
And one has to look at a list system, not only in that the leadership can control the list, but the list can control the leadership. Now, do you think that Cyril will outlast the National General Council next year?
Absolutely.
You will?
Yeah.
And you're confident of that?
I'm completely confident. First of all, the National General Council, the rules of the National General Council, that they cannot change an elective conference decision, and they cannot make any new appointments. So they can replace people who've died or whatever, but they can't remove a sitting official elected at a...
But how were both Mbeki and Zuma removed? Or withdrawn, or recalled, as the phrase goes?
Mbeki was, by the time he was recalled, he was no longer president. No longer president of the party.
That's right.
Yeah. And he lost that.
And same thing with
and
Zuma.
he lost that at a conference,
Yeah.
right? Zuma...
but they recalled him as president, which is what I'm talking about.
Yes, yeah. But then the circumstances don't yet exist for them to recall him as president, because he's still leader of the party.
But if this revealing of the bank accounts and the bribery network behind them turns out to be solidified, and he is shown to have known more than he claims to have known, which has already come out, that might well be his Hiroshima. It
might be his Hiroshima, and it might not be. I mean, I just think it's too early to call. It's too early to call it done. And I don't know if you saw Carol Payton's story in the paper this morning. Just going through the economists, he just called up 5 or 6 economists about what's going to happen to the ratings, etc., etc., etc. And they were much more relaxed than the commentariat, basically. Gulam Balam, I think, from the Standard Bank, was saying, Moody's may not even downgrade their outlook. We need, obviously, some movement on policy, and an ESCOM plan is absolutely vital. But Moody's has been, particularly Pravin has courted Moody's now ever since that moment in December 2015. I don't think he's going to blow it.
Well,
willingly blow it.
Pravin is seen to have been part of this network that is now being exposed. But let's wait to see what happens with Moody. Yeah. I want to just rewind a bit, because it's the thing that I've always wanted to discuss with you, and that is your allegation of a lack of an economic plan in the DA.
Yeah.
Now, we've had that discussion very often, and I remember, if you don't mind me recalling this, that one day you wrote a column or an editorial saying the big problem with the DA is that they don't have an economic plan, but the very day before that, we had held our briefing, which your newspaper covered, on our economic plan. Now,
I might have written the column a day before you did, but who knows? You know, the deadline's a deadline.
It looked pretty ironic to have, well, the DA's done nothing about it. I mean, we just had a briefing for journalists. But I know when I was the leader, and I certainly can't speak for the DA now, but when I was the leader, we put an enormous effort. It was almost like that's the economy stupid.
Yeah.
And we had our very detailed 8% growth and jobs plan, in which we had very, very important policy proposals.
Yeah.
And I would have called it a stakeholder market economy. You call it stakeholder capitalism. I'm very sold on the German model.
Yeah.
But for example, we looked at fiscal stability, policy certainty. We looked at infrastructure.
I've read it, you know, and you go through DA policy documents, and it's all there. I mean,
it's all there.
But as leaders, you didn't speak to it.
Oh my
so
goodness, non-stop.
No, that's not
but
true.
But it's not sexy. The journalists don't want that. If you swear at someone, then they front page lead. But if you're talking about your infrastructure-led economic growth policies or your export-led growth,
I think you've got to, you know. But it depends on the leader. You're not an economist. I'm certainly not an economist. So most of the time, I've got to call people and say, is this reasonable to say this? But it was not your instinctive go-to place as a political leader. Neither was it Tony's, and it's certainly not Musi Maimani's. And it's interesting because even now, I find, so there's an economic debate in Parliament tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. Musi Maimani was tweeting the other day, I read it somewhere, probably on the DA website or out of the DA website. He's got a couple of points to play, and they look exactly like what I was talking to him about 3 or 4 years ago. He didn't raise the economy to any real extent in the last election. Once again, it was corruption, and it was something, and I know those are important, and they're
important for the economy.
Well, I understand that. I know, but you want to hear what will you do,
but
and
Peter,
what particularly, and what's liberal about it, because what you're looking for is what I'm looking for is an ideological home. I want to say I'm this or I'm that.
Okay, now let me just say to you, on policy, we are having big policy debates right now, and they are right in the economic firing line or ballpark, as you would describe it, because they're going to destroy our economy. The national health insurance is one of them. Now, if the DA or any other opposition party, because I'm certainly not here speaking for the DA, if any opposition party was not hammering on the NHI and showing just what a disaster it's going to be for the economy and for every single South African, they would be failing in their job.
Absolutely, but I mean, there's one thing to respond to the ANC policy with, this is bad, expropriation without compensation is awful, etc., etc. But what I want to know is what are you for? And excuse me, but you do not. I guarantee you now, if you ask the people who are watching this conversation across the corridor, they won't be able to give you 5 points on the DA economic policy because they don't know, because you don't talk about it.
But you know what? Very few people are going to know the details of any party's economic policy because these things are complex and people aren't really interested in them very often.
No.
But they're certainly interested in the impact. Now, when I look at the DA's critique of the NHI, or the DA's critique of expropriation without compensation, two things that are going to ruin this economy, they always do come up with alternatives. They've got the Sizani model as an alternative to NHI, which sounds a very good one because it's going to maximize the choice that individuals have with a state subsidy, either to go to private or to public health care. And then on land reform, they've got everything stretching from the rural areas and security of tenure on communally owned land right to urban areas. And as long as the yardstick is food and jobs and security of tenure, that is the answer.
Are there marketing budgets behind these policies? I mean, can you go out and put posters up, take adverts in newspapers, rather than just put them on the website as policy documents?
Yes, they are. People talk about them all the time. But I can guarantee you, I can spell these things out in words of one syllable, And people can watch them, and really informed people can watch them. But when the lights go out and you speak to people and say, I want 5 points on the DAs or the EFFs or any other parties, land reform policies, it's very, very hard to regurgitate them. These are complex things. And politics...
No, I know. Look, I mean, so we get told how many people are reading our columns, right? So you can measure this sort of stuff. And so I, for instance, I thought I write one on Mondays for the Financial Mail, which I thought I would turn into a sort of media column. And the readership has always been quite good. My numbers have been fantastic. But the moment I wasn't talking about corruption or Ramaphosa or whatever, the numbers disappeared. Nobody's interested.
Well, that's exactly the point. I mean, if I swore at you or somebody called me something or the bots and the trolls, and by the way, one day I want to show you that, because when I send you that direct mail in the middle of the big fight we were having about my tweet, I said, it's not what you think it is. I spent a lot of money getting my tweets analyzed, and 75% of the furor was created by bots.
3 people.
And sock puppets, people pretending to be people they weren't. And the graph is fascinating. So it was a whole lot of manufactured outrage that the newspapers followed, and that became a whole fat scandal. But be that as it may,
well, they've been sort of found out now, so we know how they get started.
Well, that was Bell Pottinger. That's what they were doing. I was probably the first target. So that's kind of a feather in my cap that they thought I was so important.
They did about 20,000 tweets on me too.
On you?
Or 2,000, I can't remember.
And they came to your house too?
Well, the BLF came to the house. These
are all fronts for various things.
Sure,
Oh, well, that's interesting. You and I in the same boat here.
No, I think Ferial was there too. She got she had a terrible time with photoshopped images of her. And
did you see the photoshopped images of me?
No,
I won't even begin to talk about them.
I mean, I really feel sorry for the women in this saga, because, I had my own...
Well, there were some men who were photoshopped, believe me.
Really?
Not flatteringly either.
I had... what happened to me was scary, but I think what has been done to women has been shocking by these people.
No. Women don't deserve any special treatment.
No. But I think threatening somebody with rape and that sort of thing is...
No, that's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. But the thing is, I refuse to see myself as a victim, and I fight back. So I don't block these people. I just fight back. But I just want to talk to...
block them.
I don't block them. I fight back. I love a fight. Even if it's in the gutter of Twitter, which it is. It's a complete sewer, Twitter. But I can fight in a sewer, and I can fight at the Oxford. Who cares? I don't care about getting into trouble.
Really? Are you finished with politics?
Well, I don't know. I'll never be finished with politics. I love it. I love the debate, the big debate on real issues that will take this country forward.
I mean, you've just joined the Institute of Race Relations as a fellow, right?
Yes, as a senior policy fellow,
right. What is the intersection between the DA now and the IRR in the policy sense? I mean, they have policy and research on land reform or on national health that you would have in the DA as well.
The Institute of Race Relations is completely independent. It looks at how to create a major ecosystem on classical liberal values. And that's what it does. And it measures all policies, all statements, all initiatives, all events, all developments against that yardstick, and generates public debate.
And are you confident that the picture that it builds is true to liberal values? I mean, I tell you why I ask. I've read Michael Carter's really good book on Peter Brown and the old Liberal Party.
Absolutely excellent.
And it just struck me that between them, people like Michael Carter and Alan Paton were more activist and more angry than the liberalism we see coming out of the DA.
You don't want me to be more angry, do you?
Well, no, but I mean, but they
Not really.
But they were operating in very much more difficult circumstances than
I'm not sure, Now let me just explain.
I mean, Peter Brown was banned twice.
But let me explain to you why it is easier to work on the moral high ground, even though you are under a lot of pressure, than it is to be cast out of society as some kind of labeled racist, which is absolutely untrue. It's a label that is intended to close down conversation and make an intelligent debate impossible.
I agree with you.
And I'm really very opposed to that. And today, somehow the ideology that underpinned apartheid identity politics has become progressive. And anybody who stands by non-racialism, the rule of law, personal accountability is cast out. But let me get back to your question on liberalism. There are only two major ideas in liberalism. The one is the primacy of the individual over the group. It doesn't mean to say that individuals can't form groups of their choice. Of course they can. Freedom of association is essential to liberal values. But the individual has to be free to choose their own group. And the second idea is human fallibility, and all the checks and balances that are built into constitutions, our constitution in particular, are based on this notion of human fallibility, separation of powers, all of those things. Only two core ideas in liberalism. So you'll find that there's quite a broad range of debates in between, but those two ideas are absolutely central to progress in
democracy. But if you take the German model, right, the way the Germans organized their economy, or the way it was organized for them by the Allies after the war, how does that, you know, when you decide that it's the law that you will have unions on your boards, or what do they call it, Mitbestimmung?
Mitbestimmung,
and the main creditor is usually also it's either the Commerce Bank or Deutsche Bank or Dresdner is on your board. The chairman is usually that's not individual. That's not liberal. That's a society doing something en masse in a way. I mean,
let me explain to you. The rules of the game are written so that individuals are empowered to make the best of their lives or become the best they can be. It doesn't mean to say that you don't have entities and corporations and people joining unions of their free choice and unions having a space on boards. All of those things are absolutely inherent in a liberal society. What liberals reject is someone telling you what and who you are on the basis of your biological characteristics and on the basis of things like your religion and various other things.
That's South African liberals. I mean, it doesn't happen to...
It maximizes individual freedom. It happens all over the world now that the left
But Helen,
tells
it can
people
also
who they
lead
are.
you to, it can also lead you up difficult terrain, you know. If you, for instance, the DA policy, and I don't know whether it still is you wanted to create an opportunity society, right? So everybody has equal opportunity. But that's not true, because it's patently not true that, you know, people we can see outside here have the same opportunities that we have.
But it's a goal. It's a goal. And
you don't
certainly
say
you can't manipulate outcomes in preference to trying to equalize opportunities.
I understand that.
But I want to come back to you on this whole idea of liberalism on this particular point. Central to liberalism is individual agency and accountability. Now, we've been looking at accountability in this conversation for quite a long time, looking at the public protector, looking at the National Director of Public Prosecutions, looking at the South African Revenue Service. What about Parliament? With all of the revelations, Parliament is in a very difficult position, because there was a Court decision not too long ago that says Parliament had failed in its duty of holding President Zuma to account for the spending of Nkandla. Now, what are they going to do vis-a-vis all of these revelations that are coming now? What is Parliament going to do, not only about Busisiwe Mkhwebane and the damning court judgments that have been passed about her, but most crucially about the president and where they're going to go from here?
Well, I have no idea, you know. I mean, they're going to be judged by their actions. I think that Thandi Modise shows, the new speaker, shows some degree of willingness to do the right thing, go by the book. I think she's going to allow the debate that Musi Maimane wanted on Bosasa. Have I got that right? Or
Bosasa, yes, the Bosasa donation.
So, you know, the opposition parties have got to demand accountability.
But the whole of Parliament has to demand accountability.
Well,
that's the point.
You know,
the ANC in Parliament also has to. So that Concord judgment has profound implications for what Parliament does now.
Which committee would listen to that, by the way?
There's a committee, certainly there was a committee on the Premier when I was the Premier of the Western Cape. So there must be a committee on the presidency.
Well, there's probably a justice one or something. Yeah, look, I mean, you know, this funding story needs to be examined until there's nothing left to examine. And people who are on the receiving end of these monies, and we know exactly who they are.
Yeah, their names were
great?
on the
I mean, the work's been done. You know?
Their names
so
were
we know who got 14 million rand or 5 million rand. And, you know, a visit from Ed Kieswetter's colleagues is almost certain. I would have thought. I'd be amazed if he didn't. I'd be really disappointed if he didn't. You know, because my supposition is that they were given that money to do a job, to do something with. Okay, not for just being there.
And did they keep the books, and can they be audited, and all of these questions?
You know, I don't know. It's early days. We just don't know. But it's an unprecedented situation for a politician to find themselves in.
It is absolutely unprecedented, and it's a major challenge for him.
Yeah.
Now, I want to come back to you about an allegation or a rumor, which is always very difficult. But it's one that affects the media, so I do want to raise it with you. Musi Maimane has been criticized for raising this question of the Bosasa donation, and I can understand exactly why he raised it, and also why he referred it to the Public Protector, because if there's a breach of the Executive Ethics Act, the Public Protector is the only person empowered in law to investigate it. So he did that, and in all the blundering that the Public Protector has done, this has all been revealed through her powers under the FICA, the Financial Institution Centres Act. So all of this is now on the table.
He wasn't criticised only by the media. I mean, Tony Leon had a fat go at him.
Yes,
well.
I know. And I said I understood the dilemma. So people always have a fat go at you when you're a politician, and if you don't like that, you shouldn't go into politics. But the important thing is this. I heard a rumour, and it might well only be a rumour, that all of the leaks going on and everybody trying to expose their enemies inside the ANC, that this story of Bosasa and its donation was offered first to journalists who turned it down because it would have put Cyril Ramaphosa in a bad light, and then they went to the DA afterwards. Have you heard of that?
Nobody's ever approached me with that, you know, and I'm ashamed to say that until very recently, I mean in the last year or so, I didn't know what Bosasa was. And if you look back at some of the work that City Press carried, when I think Ferreira was editor, and Adrian Basson was her deputy, I think, or he's a good investigative journalist by any standards. He had hold of the Bosasa story in a way that nobody else did, and I would have looked at it and skimmed over it and moved on, because they're always so complicated, these things, and I was probably lazy. I certainly, nobody ever offered me anything to. Nobody offered me any sort of information in that way about the Bosasa loan.
No,
I don't
know
about
not
it.
you personally, but I would, you know,
and I don't
it's
know
an interesting
about it.
thing for me, because all of these great things that are, well, not all, but many of the things that are trumpeted as the great outcomes of investigative journalism are probably just somebody in the ANC who wants to get at somebody else and sneaks a document under a door.
Look, I think there were investigative journalists and investigative journalists. And
I think Jacques Poe's a good investigative journalist. So
well, Jacques, yeah, of course he is. I mean, but the you know, what you get given to you isn't investigative.
It's not investigative.
Not really.
No, of course it isn't.
What you go out and look for.
That's
so what I like about, say, Amabongane is that they set themselves a task. You know, let's go and have a look at something. Maybe somebody does say, oh, look, there's a dodgy tender in Joburg, or for ambulances or whatever, not ambulances.
So they give cars. You a minor tip-off, and then you go and follow it up.
And you spend a month, 2 months
investigating
it up, which you do, and nobody expects you to write a story every day.
But seeing that you are a journalist, can I just get to this one point here? It's common cause that the Zuma years were a disaster, and many of them have called it the 9 wasted years. But there was really a Zuma choir, a Zuma support team in the media in the run-up to his election and afterwards. And many of those journalists who were precisely promoting Jacob Zuma are now the first to be deriding him and building up this whole dream of Cyril Ramaphosa being able to take us to a new dawn. Now, at what point do journalists get held accountable? At what point do they do some mea culpa-ing?
Well, you've got to be. There's certain things that you've got to take account of. I think one is what kind of journalist, because I think, you know, an analyst who I know that I wrote positively about Zuma when he first came in because I was hopeful, you know, and Becky had been aloof, and I thought there was a bit of Ronald Reagan somehow in Zuma, who would be, you know, smart enough to get smart people to know what he doesn't know, and hopefully get smart people around him to do. But it quickly became clear that that wasn't the case. I don't. There are journalists who actively supported him, still working, and I think, you know, they know that everybody knows what they did.
But they've never. I mean, they just go seamlessly into the next.
I don't know that it's seamless.
You don't think?
I don't think so. Everybody.
It looks seamless to me.
Yeah, it may, but they've, you know, I think in their newsrooms and in their work, there's always a calculation you make.
But they have such major impact. And to do those kinds of things.
You know,
oh, yes. Oh, yeah. How do people...
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What was the lead in the Sunday Times 3 days ago?
The lead in the Sunday Times 3 days ago. The lead in the Sunday Times 3 days ago, and of course I read newspapers all of the time, was...
Front page.
Just hold on. It was, oh yes, the heist on Johann Rupert's
It took you a while to get there.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I can tell you what the lead in the City Press was, because it was a much more important story.
Yeah.
Which was this whole CR campaign.
Yeah.
I can tell you what the lead in Rapport was, but I read 3 or 4 newspapers every day.
I'm just
so
saying
to get
that
a particular newspaper.
Yeah, but you know, I don't quite remember what point I was making, but
you won't remember. Let me tell you, it creates a zeitgeist.
Yeah.
So everyone says, oh, what a wonderful person this is.
Yeah.
Not because they can remember any particular story, but because it's pumped up over time.
Yeah.
And the extent to which, for example, many people that I met who said, well, I'm voting for the ANC because I'm voting for Cyril Ramaphosa. And I said, you're not voting for Cyril Ramaphosa. You're voting for a list which will have such a fight-back campaign you will never see. So that's another issue.
No, but you said to me, the best way to support Cyril is to vote DA.
That's right.
And look what's happening to the poor guy now. He's got Musi who jumped out of his seat in Parliament and hugged him on the day that he was
let me explain this to you.
Now he's basically accusing him of money laundering. I don't think people know what money laundering is, you know. Theft isn't money laundering.
No. Theft isn't money laundering, but they're both bad.
Yeah, sure.
They both don't befit a president.
Yeah.
Now, if I can just simply say one other thing, and this is important. You and I have agreed long ago that the deal with the EFF was not ideal, and I opposed it very strongly, and you did too. Yes, we absolutely did. And the reason that I think that the stronger the DA is, the better for the country and the better for the reformists in the ANC, is because when they eventually realize that it's impossible to salvage the ANC, and that you either salvage the country or hold the ANC together, and when you realize that that's the choice, and the ANC has to split yet again, fundamentally, you want a very strong DA base to be able to help the reformists, the people who believe in non-racialism, if there are any left by now, the rule of law, a capable state, and all of those to be able to build a new majority. That's why I believe the DA cushion is so critical. Realignment has to happen, and we need to drive it, and that's why I said if you want to support Cyril, really support Cyril, vote for the DA. And I think, you know, the jury is out. Either you are right or I am right. We're going to see.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I didn't understand that, you know, I didn't understand the subtleties of what you were trying to say. I sort of disagree with it, but it's not I don't think it's a big disagreement or anything like that. I just, you know, a lot of what I wrote about this, it was so interesting, this Cyril thing for me last year, because I started off as not a joke, but you know what it's like, you've got to think of something to write about. So I thought the conversation in the pub was, and I'm very reactive when I write, because I write 3 columns a week. It's
I know how
painful.
difficult it is.
And so you get a lot of people just started hacking away at me, and so I started responding.
Oh, I understand.
And the more I responded, the worse it got. And the letters page on the Sunday Times, there would be my name in the headline of the letter. You know, who does this man think he is? And there I would be below in a column defending something before the letter. Then I'd have to go and do something about the letter.
I understand
that. It just got out of hand.
I like the fact that you and I have often been on opposite sides of a debate, and I love to see in history who turned out to be right.
Yeah.
And let's just say, let me take, and it's not a competition or anything, but I just like to look at it, right?
Yeah.
So, because there are consequences for politicians getting things wrong. There are huge consequences for politicians getting things wrong, but it's quite nice to be a journalist because there are very few consequences to getting things wrong. So when I look back, and this is only the one time I'm going to touch on this, you know that I drove the Stop Zuma campaign in 2009.
Yeah.
Our slogan was Stop Zuma, because I could see it was coming. I unpacked the entire thing about state capture back then.
Well, congratulations.
Back
you know,
then.
we didn't.
And I unpacked that then, and you said in one of your columns, the DA's Stop Zuma campaign is so bad and so painful that you can't even bear to write about it. Remember?
I don't remember it. No, I don't. I mean, it's a long time ago, but let's say I'm sure I said that, if you're quoting it to me, and I was wrong. And it was a silly thing to say. I can't, you know, I sometimes try to remember what I felt like in 2009 when all that was happening. It was a shock when Mbeki, the big shocks were Mbeki firing Zuma, do you remember, 2005? I still got a picture of the Business Day newsroom, all of us looking at the same TV camera, unbelievingly that he was going to do this, you know, which was the moment that set off
the whole train of events.
The whole thing. Imagine how much money and time Zuma had to spend between being fired and becoming president, all of which would have been funded by the Guptas.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and then setting in train his own succession, which would have cost another fortune, because you had to first get Nkosazana to be the head of the AU commission. That must have cost a serious amount of money, because you weren't buying the odd votes of somebody in Gumbu. You were buying whole countries.
Absolutely.
You know.
And this is the thing that's been blown wide open, and that's critical. Now, having spoken about one point that you were wrong, let me speak about a point in which I may be wrong.
Oh, that's generous of you.
No. Well, it's a very important point, because I agonize about this, Peter. I agonize about this a lot. I believe that if the ANC splits, we can realign politics and get people together who believe in constitutionalism, the rule of law, non-racialism, an open market economy, the separation between party and state, all the great values that we support, and get this country on track again. But what if the guys that we think are the good guys, like Cyril Ramaphosa, despite everything that we've known about him, or Pravin Gordhan, more specifically, or many others, still support an ideology that comes out of Leninism and that argues that the party must control the state and the state must control the economy, and individuals don't have agency.
No, they're there, you know. So I mean,
but they're all there, and it's called the National Democratic Revolution in short. Now, it's not going to help to try and realign politics and getting a new majority that you think can eventually take the country forward on a basis of core principles, and then find, no, they actually got a new majority for the National Democratic Revolution. And we may all turn out to be wrong. Cyril and Pravin and others may be somewhat less corrupt, maybe not at all, given to see what happens to the outcome of these revelations. But they may just be proponents of the NDR carrying on looking at this Leninist two-stage revolution which will destroy this country.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that there are two ministers that count in this cabinet more than others. They're sort of, you know, more than equal. And it's Pravin Gordhan and Ibrahim Patel. They're both very powerful. They're
both from the SACP.
Is Ibrahim? I know he's a Kusatu guy.
I don't know. You can't get high in Kusatu if you're not SACP. Well, you couldn't at the time.
And they hold very strong ideological positions, and from which I don't think they are budgeable. And I wrote the other day, and I was trying to be subtle, but I'll be unsubtle about it now. You know, I was playing with the idea that while you were good at cleaning up these state-owned enterprises and ridding them of corruption, doesn't mean to say that you're necessarily going to be good at running them.
Absolutely.
And I suppose I might have had Pravin in mind then, because he hasn't let go, and he hasn't let go of this notion of the state being the dominant or a dominant feature of the economy. He would like to find a way, and I don't think I'm misrepresenting him, of improving state-owned enterprises and making them pay their own way so that they make a contribution. But he likes the state-owned companies, and they're going to
Well, you see,
around.
that is the biggest
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have the capability.
But it's a
or the
perfect opportunity, isn't it? Because not all people in the ANC think that, by the way. I don't think Cyril does. But, you know, he owes a huge debt to Pravin Gordhan because he's been very courageous in the face of a terrible time being given by the EFF and all these things. It's a... you know, the split that you were looking for, and you described it to me, and I've written about it a lot of times.
Yes, I drew
Your
a
triangle.
diagram.
Your triangle.
That's right.
And at, you know, the bottoms of each triangle was, you know, the triangle was the ANC, and it was the DA and
That's right,
EFF
correct.
eating away at it. And there are liberals in the ANC. There are people who can be persuaded, you know, and there might have to be people in the DA who can be persuaded to compromise as well. But what you have to be careful of in the DA is that you don't split yourselves first, you know, because there are quite obvious divisions in the party. I don't know whether the conversations that go on now will heal that. And I don't know whether the party will be able to go in to the next election with Mmusi Maimane as leader. Unless he, for me anyway, ups his game with an economic policy and talks the economy. Just the economy. Don't talk to me about how corrupt Cyril Ramaphosa. I'm not interested in that message. I already know about the funding scandal, etc., etc. Not because of the politicians are telling me, but because it's in the newspapers and it's in the media everywhere you look. Talk to me about something I don't already know. Talk to me about how passionate you are about economic inclusion. Talk to me about how passionate you are about you know, small business or creating employers. I mean, Mmusi talks about, and you all have done that. You all talk about jobs. You don't talk about creating employers. You know,
No,
and
that's
without
investment is the most important thing. And
but you don't put it on your posters.
All right, now let me just explain this to you. We can all be sitting here talking about an economic policy to take us into the future, and have national health insurance, which is another state-owned enterprise, which is going to destroy our economy.
It's not going to happen.
Have expropriation without compensation that's going to destroy all investment and all entrepreneurs and all job creation. Have the nationalization of the Reserve Bank, which will just destroy the currency. Have the National Credit Act, which is going to stop people lending money to the poor. All the perverse consequences of all of that.
Yeah.
We have to talk. People have to talk about that. The whole of South Africa has to be talking about that, because that will destroy any chances of economic growth.
Yeah.
Yes, on each one of those you have to say, here is the alternative.
Yeah.
I agree. But every single person in South Africa needs to understand the implications of these laws coming down the pike. And the good
but they
things
mustn't
that Cyril,
exaggerate it, Helen. You know, so I was reading a piece from, I think it was on the SAIRR's website. It was about, I think it was a piece by Frans Cronje.
Cronje, yes.
And he was going through expropriation with our conversation, etc., etc. And he, instead of stopping at a certain point, he brought Anthea Jeffries into the conversation, and it was about what could happen even though we've, you know, got the wording here right. So it was kind of, you can exaggerate the effects of, let's say, expropriation without compensation to the point where you do say we're all, you know, we're going to lose our houses and
well,
you know.
Let me tell you that that is on the basis of experience, Peter, because let me...
You even wrote a piece, and I thought it was a really good one. You actually suggested that a piece of land in Cape Town be expropriated without compensation.
That's right.
You made a very good case for it.
I did make a good case for it.
And what's, you know, why didn't you do it?
I made, well, because I don't have the power,
Yeah.
but I made the case for using expropriation in which zero compensation would have been appropriate in that particular context. So I think the great danger comes to say, okay, expropriation without compensation. You could say expropriation where in those particular circumstances the appropriate compensation is zero. And there was a piece of land which filled those conditions entirely, and I did argue for that. It's very important.
The DA did take part, I'm not mistaken, in the discussions about the expropriation bill that's just been passed,
yes, but I just
which outlines those 5 or 6 instances.
But you see, they talk about, and specifically in the bill, they say property is not immovable property only. And in that context, it is incredibly important to understand other kind of property. And intellectual property is also now under assault with the Copyright Act and various other things. So it is not far-fetched to say, well, it could also be this and it could also be that.
But you participated in the passage of that bill, or did the DA oppose it?
Well, my understanding is that there was strong opposition, but I can't speak for the DA.
I just remember John Steenhuisen. I was on the radio show with him in December, and he mentioned that the DA had, that the committee
tried to amend that.
Well, no, that the DA had participated in the creation of this legislation, which identifies what can be expropriated without compensation or not.
Well, you see,
and I wanted to ask him.
The big problem is that the goalposts keep changing. So let me draw an analogy. Trying to get anything right with the ANC is like person A saying to person B, will you sleep with me for $10 million?
Yeah.
Person B says, $10 million? For $10 million maybe.
Yeah.
And person A says, well, that's great. Now that we've established the principle, let's discuss the price.
Yeah.
That's the whole issue. And they catch you on a little thing and they say, okay, like the mining charter. The mining charter starts nicely initially, very nicely. And the mines don't want to be recalcitrant. They want to be helpful in the new South Africa. They say, okay. And they end up with such a ghastly set of circumstances, not once empowered, always empowered, but you always have to re-empower and a whole range of things, that now the mining industry has died in South Africa.
To be in the position where you want to be in the DA, where you can be...
I can't speak for the DA.
I know. But to be in that position where you can go off with the part of the ANC that you can do business with, right? Let's say that it splits along some line or other. What are the sort of minimum requirements that you would have as a DA for that splinter of the ANC that you do business with?
Okay, I think that's very important.
Because Ramaphosa, you would know, he has to go back to the NGC next year and report progress on all of these things. And he thinks, I'm sure, that he can finesse the land thing. You're saying he absolutely can't.
Well, I don't think he can finesse something where you can expropriate without compensation and where you don't impact on the economy or food security.
But you're ready to agree as a party, had agreed as a party, that the current constitution already allows for expropriation. But why hasn't that torn the economy apart?
No, it hasn't, because it says in certain... what it says is at the appropriate valuation. And it is also evaluated not by a politician, but by I think it's a court mechanism. I must be absolutely accurate here. By a court mechanism. But what they want to do is take it out of the court mechanism into a political appointee's position to determine on a whole range of additional grounds. And that is the problem. It gives all those additional grounds. So what we've been saying is the Constitution, and that's why I wrote that article, says it's got to be appropriate compensation. It doesn't take away compensation. It says it's got to be appropriate compensation.
I've not heard about this political person deciding what's...
The valuer general or whatever he's called.
But I mean, he might be a judge.
Well, he might not be. That's the trouble. It might be a Mkhwebane. We don't know if he's appointed by the... So,
but, I mean, your input into the discussion is on that then point. Can we just say that this rests with a court or whatever? I mean, I don't know how the political process works.
You say, A, we don't have to change the Constitution, and B, we don't have to change the Constitution, and B, there are occasions, very carefully delineated, where zero compensation might be appropriate. And that is why I took just
But how do you prepare yourselves to be, in the ANC's eyes, or the splinter's eyes, a reasonable partner?
Okay, I think that's a very good question, because I've spent a lot of time thinking of it. I think in South Africa we can't move away from constitutionalism and the rule of law, but genuinely so. That's number one. Number two for me is non-racialism. If we go into racial identity politics, we have had it in this country. Building one nation, nation building a sense of a common future and inclusive economy, which both you and I support, is going to be off the charts if we turn minorities into enemies. We've got to have genuine non-racialism in South Africa. The third is an open market economy, because I don't think we can have any progress without it. We won't have investment, we won't have jobs, we won't have growth.
But so I mean, there's a German sort of correction in there. The social market economy, as they call it, by definition more inclusive than the open market.
Of course it is, but you see, I completely support that. I mean, when I was still a leader of the DA, we proposed, for example, privatizing SOEs, but making sure that the workers had a large, people who worked them, a large slice of the capital, I mean, of the equity. And so all of those kinds of things we are completely open to. I love the German model, I think it's excellent, but in the German model, everyone takes huge responsibility and massive accountability. And you don't slough off, you know.
Yeah, you take the risks together.
You take the risks together, and you know, it's a very, very co-ownership, co-focus type of thing. So that's important. So it's non-racialism, the rule of law, a market economy, and I would completely go with the inclusive market economy. And then I think in South Africa we have to emphasize the separation between party and state. We definitely need an independent, meritocratically appointed civil service. If we don't have a capable state, we are doomed. And the result of cronyism and of state capture, which is often misinterpreted, it's got nothing to do with Guptas capturing the state. It's got something to do with the Zuma faction of the ANC capturing the state, and then all the Guptas had to do was capture Zuma. And we have to have a separation between party and state. So on those four attributes, I would say those are the conditions.
I mean, in theory, we already do. Just that it's ignored by the ANC because they can't tell the difference. I mean, the fact that somebody gets hired as a DG or let's say the Department of Labour, surely is that's and they're not qualified to, but they are owed a favour by somebody for whatever.
That's catered deployment.
Surely that can be. Surely cater deployment can be attacked legally. I mean, you became very good as a party at making points legally, and I think the spy taste was the classic example, and that was all you, for which thank you as a citizen. No,
well, I fought very hard for that.
Well, I mean,
but that was at a time when I got a lot of flack from the journalists because Zuma was riding on a wave of popularity, and they were saying, "Keep quiet, man." And then I attacked him for what he was doing to his wives by having unprotected sex with an HIV-positive woman. There was an outcry for 3 months, if you remember. Now, what I said about Jacob Zuma looks mild in comparison to what you guys say about Jacob Zuma. But there was an outcry for months.
And you did dance with him.
I did dance with him. And I have to say, he's a damn good dancer. And I will say for him that he's bloody nice to me. Even in the biggest fights that we've had, he was nicer to me than anyone in our own party.
He's a charming guy.
Yeah, but it's called the banality of evil. That's what it's called. Anyway, the bottom line is that we don't know in South Africa. We try to struggle towards the light. We have a guiding framework called the Constitution. We have to maintain a democracy, so many solutions like Singapore or China are not open to us at all. We have to have economic growth in the context of a democracy, which is much noisier, much harder, much more pulling in other directions. And we have to do it in a context where identity is still such a powerful factor in overriding the issues of policy and principle. And so we've got a huge job to perform here.
I think, and you've written a lot about identity and its presence in our politics. And I genuinely think, what do they say? There was a German rock band that once titled a song, "Every Generation Has Its Own Disease."
Very true.
And then the other people would have said challenges or make their own history or whatever. And I think it's a generational thing. I think it'll pass. You've got a young Norwegian girl, or is it a Danish girl, about to sail alone across the Atlantic in a green, energy-friendly yacht on her own. And that's the next generation. It's going to be climate. It's going to be climate change, and it'll create a whole new set of diseases and challenges and history making.
Well, as long as Greta doesn't keep our kids out of school,
yeah,
in order to drive the climate change issue, I'd be very grateful, because they also have to learn how to read and write.
Yeah.
So to each generation its own.
Yeah.
We know what we did in our generation,
Yeah.
Peter. It's been good fun, and we certainly aren't dead yet. They'll have to swat us a bit harder.
Standing.
We're still standing. And it's been a really great pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you.
And good luck with this in the future.
Thank you.
I shall watch all of the editions.
Good.
Yeah, I've just signed up.
Oh, fabulous.
500 and what am I? But yeah, you've done very well. So thank you, Helen.
It's really great, Peter.
Nice.
Thank you so much. And you haven't drunk any of your rooibos tea?
No, I'm sorry. Hey, I'm not a tea drinker.